Actually learned about Storenvy kind of backwards. I saw that it has a store in the Crocker Galleria, and I thought it was only a local store, and then I learned it's this really awesome kind of whole online marketplace. So I knew that I wanted to at least talk to Jon and see if he'd had any struggles kind of building up this both real and, I guess online is real too, but physical real and internet real business. We then hopped on a call, and he was telling me about, I think he'll tell you the story, but I think he let his entire team go. He literally hired a full team, worked with them for a while, and then realized that wasn't the direction he needed to go in and rehired his entire team again. So he's taking the stage to talk with you a little bit about hiring and what you should be looking for in your employees to make sure that you're building a startup for success. Here's Jon.
Hello. Okay. Ooh, it's like stand-up. I like it. Hey, anybody from Toronto? Just kidding. Good morning, you guys. I'm Jon, and I'm going to talk to you about how to build a dysfunctional team, something I'm really good at. First, just about failure. The thing is that I'm a first-time founder, first-time CEO. I've been working on my company in various phases for almost 5 years, but it's kind of only been a real thing for about 3. And the only thing that I consider like my main skill is being able to learn really fast. And failure is the easiest way to learn. So a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about today are just sort of, I don't really consider them failures. I consider them paths to finally figuring out what worked. But some of them were really expensive. So I'll go through those. So I'm Jon. I love selfies. I'm from the Midwest. I started my company in Kansas City, Missouri, and then moved to Austin, and then moved out to San Francisco, kind of on accident. I'm not going to go into this story, but some people have heard my backstory where I actually got kicked out of Y Combinator on the very first day. Google it. There's a whole thing about it. It's been covered. It's kind of like legendary a little bit. But there's a lot more failures beyond that I'm going to go into. So what I do is I have a sort of an e-commerce retail platform for creative businesses, and kind of what makes it unique is you can shop from about 60,000 independent brands all in one place, but we actually give all these people their own online store, and it looks like their own website, and then anything that they put into their store is available kind of on the marketplace, so it's kind of the best of both worlds of your own website and a marketplace, so you can actually get customers instead of having to be an online marketing expert. So that's what we do. Every single startup is dysfunctional. Like, that's the whole point. So have you heard the analogy, like, doing a startup is like jumping off a cliff with a whole bunch of parts and trying to put a plane together on the way down, right? And you just hope that before you hit the bottom, you've assembled some kind of an airplane. And, that's what you sign up for when you found a startup or when you join a startup. It's supposed to be a mess. It's supposed to be uncomfortable, and you're doing a lot of things inefficiently, and then you're figuring out what works progressively. So that's okay. If you're not comfortable with dysfunction, then you probably shouldn't work at a startup. But I've kind of figured out that there's 2 kinds of dysfunction in a startup. One, there's organizational dysfunction, where basically you guys just aren't working very well together, but that's fixable. And then there's just toxic dysfunctions where, and these are not like official scientific terms, these are just, in my experience, the 2 kinds that you encounter, especially in a startup. And a toxic dysfunction, you kind of can figure out what that means. It's a lot worse off than an organizational dysfunction. And I've failed at both of these kinds of dysfunction. So I'm going to talk about the toxic one first because it happened first chronologically. So first of all, with a toxic dysfunction, it could kill your whole organization, like from the inside out. You might have all the pieces right, you've got the business right, you've got everything that you need, but there's some element that spoils everything. You know, little Michael Jackson used to sing, "One bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch," but that's actually not true. One bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. It's science, guys. Check it out. It's also very, very often, in my experience, something with the culture, not necessarily with a business decision or something in the market, but actually something on your team, or, I mean, it could even be like, you know, what part of town you've decided to put your office. Like, it could be something that is just killing your ability to work together. And it's usually, in my experience, pretty easy to identify. It could be a team member that's kind of a jerk, or it could be anything. But it's really hard to solve because, like, he's like your most talented employee, he's your best engineer, but he's a total ass, and everyone hates working with him. And then you're like stuck because, like, he's your only engineer or something, and you need his help, but you also hate life, and so does your entire company. So there's often, in my experience with toxic dysfunctions, almost no way to solve it. It's like a poisoned limb. It's gangrenous, and it's like creeping up, and it's going to move to your heart soon and kill you. And so you just have to lob it off. So here's what happened with me. I moved to San Francisco with no team. I had a product that I built that I showed you, and investors got excited about it. I raised VC and all that stuff, and then I had to hire a team. Well, knowing nothing about team building, knowing nothing about recruiting, but I had built a platform for designers. I was like, I'm going to go find the best designers possible to work with me on this. And I did it. Like, they were these name brand guys that I'd sort of followed on Twitter and other social networks for a while and really admired their work. And I was able to recruit them to come work with me, and it sucked. So we didn't get anything done. We blew through about $500,000, which was a third of our seed round, and hadn't shipped anything because we couldn't work together. And, you know, I was really, I'm actually doing my company because I kind of just feel like I'm called to do it. You know, I'm working 150 hours a week and, really kind of just trying to serve this audience that I believe in, these independent makers. But the team members that I recruited, they were much more, let's just say that they really liked to get external validation for their work. So, you know, they weren't really interested in designing solutions to real world problems. They were looking to get, comments on their Dribble page, which is a social network for designers. So they really just wanted to get attention. There was a lot of vanity involved in what they were doing. And so, you know, I'm putting my blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, and I got this room of really talented people, but we weren't doing it for the same reasons, and it's really sucked. So for like 2 months, I did all this really stupid culture building stuff that I now regret because it was so phony and it was never even going to work. At one point I even came up with an idea called $100 Thursdays, which we would take $100 every week as a team and just figure out like the most creative way to blow it. And we were like playing movies in the office while we worked, and I was just doing all this stuff to try to like bring us together, and it was silly because I didn't want to lose this team that I'd built and wanted to like get things going, and it didn't work. So after trying a whole bunch of stupid ideas, I just decided to restart the entire team. So I think I had about 5 or 6 guys, and I brought them, one day I brought them all in. I like took them out of the office actually one by one and let them all go one at a time. And then I had to call all the investors and tell them that I'd fired my entire team. So that was awesome. And they were like, oh, okay, well, I guess some investments are bad investments. But it ended up working out because I learned a lot. It was a very expensive sort of mistake, not only because I spent $500,000 in investor money that I had planned to use for other stuff, but I also spent months and months of my time recruiting these brilliant, talented designers. And by the way, these are very wonderful people, and I think the world of them and their talents. They're going to go on to do great things, so I don't want to throw them under the bus. But what I learned is that I just didn't hire for the right reasons. I hired for these people's reputation, or I hired because I was building this thing for designers. I hired for like the cachet of being able to say, like, this great designer works on my team, you should use our product if you admire his work. And really, what I wanted was low maintenance people that were really talented, that believed in the same things as me. So now I have a team of people who all of us have the same values, and all of us have the same work ethic, and all of us really believe that we're doing important work that helps people. And I just had to learn that lesson from completely hiring a team incorrectly. But it doesn't really stop there, because now I have a brilliant, amazing team, and we still faced some dysfunction. And I had to go through months of banging my head on a wall to figure out how to make that a well-functioning organization. So first of all, an organizational dysfunction is just you guys aren't working well together. You guys you've got all the right parts, everything makes sense, but it's just not coming together, and you probably don't know why. Because, spoiler alert, it's usually probably you. But the good news is it's solvable. It's just you're working incorrectly. So here's what was going on with us. I hired a great team. I think there was about 12 or 15 of us, and I was still frustrated and still like overworked and not getting anything done and feeling some tension with the team members, and they weren't necessarily feeling like self-actuated and everything. And then I started hearing this phrase across the room every so often, which was, because Jon wants it that way. And I started hearing that more and more. I started to realize that the reason that I was feeling frustrated, the reason other team members were it seemed like their confidence in themselves was going down, and I was just needed for everything, was because I had not taught these people how to store envy. I hadn't given them the tools that they needed in order to be able to make decisions. So that meant that every single thing had to go through me. I was micromanaging everything. I founded my company based on a philosophy that impacts design, the way we tweet, the way we do customer support, what features we choose to build and how. And yet, I sort of hadn't passed that along. I just found people to do the work. This is a great JavaScript engineer that loves what we're doing and why we're doing it. All right, great. So, basically I'd be like, great, you're hired, let's start working, get that JavaScript done. And it wasn't, I wasn't mentoring these people. I wasn't teaching them how to work the way I work or think the way I think. And so we spent probably 4 months doing it like this, and it came to a point where a super awesome, talented person decided to move on to another position. And it was a big bummer for me, and I realized because he moved on because he wanted more autonomy, and the organization wasn't set up in such a way where he could have that. So what I realized is that I need to be a teacher. So if you are leading any kind of a team, if you are a founder or any kind of a manager, you are a teacher. I never intended to be a teacher. I was a programmer and designer and had an idea for a product, and that's as far as I got when I was kind of planning out my future. But now, like it or not, I'm a teacher. And so teaching people my philosophy and the way I think, and the way my company thinks, and the way our culture thinks is probably the most important part of my entire job. And I was completely skipping that entire step for months with this really talented team. And so we locked ourselves in a room, some of the leadership team and I, and we created a really formal mission statement and vision statement and brand guidelines. And the brand guidelines are actually not the externally facing guidelines, but they're actually how we behave internally, because we believe that how we behave internally is expressed through everything that comes out of the company. So take the time to invest in your team members, and I don't mean send them to how to learn Ruby on Rails. Try to incept them with the way that you think and the way the company thinks. So after these 2 fails, of which this is 2 of 100, I think I know how to build a functional team now. So here's a couple things. One, define the kind of company and the kind of culture that you want at the very beginning. And you have to write it down. You have to write it down. I didn't write it down. I had it defined in my head, but it wasn't written down. And so it was really hard for me to articulate it to someone over and over and over. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. If it's not accessible by your team, it doesn't exist. If it's not presented to them again every week or at least every month, it doesn't exist. And if you're not going over it within the first couple of days of any new team member joining your team, then it doesn't exist. So I have a very, very strict policy where anytime any member gets added to our team, and it could be it could be an intern, it could be a customer support person, it could be a senior leadership person, but I will take probably a couple hours and sit down one-on-one with the person and just teach them about our philosophy and teach them about our mission and vision, because my goal is for them to be able to make decisions the way the company would, and we're doing such a very specific, narrow, philosophy-driven thing that they have to get it right. So instead of coming to me 4 times with different revisions, and these revisions are oftentimes really good, they were incorrect. It wasn't that the design was bad, it just wasn't on point or on brand or on mission. And so I had the home court advantage for these people, and they began to lose their confidence. So if you write it down and then get buy-in from every single person as they join, you are built. That's how you can scale, because the organization will not scale if everything has to go through the one guy who's sort of the keeper of the magic spells, as I used to call it. So one really good telltale sign that you have a dysfunction in your organization is you at least once think, why does everyone else suck but me? Okay? So even if you've got this really talented team of people and you're working and working and working to try to make it work, and it won't work, and you think everyone else is the problem, well, it's not. It's you. So the biggest learning I have from all this sort of team building and organizational design is that any sort of dysfunction always starts with me. So, especially if you're a CEO, your company sort of takes on the family dynamics of your own family a lot of times, and you start playing out these roles. And so, in order for me to change the way the way my organization feels, I've had to change the way I act and change the way I think. But this is actually true for any role in an organization, because we all are playing a part of that family. So maybe you're not the CEO, maybe you're not the founder, maybe you're not the manager, but you actually have a huge impact in the way the culture feels. And usually if you have some kind of a dysfunction on your team, if you don't feel empowered to change it, you're probably just grumbling about it and being negative, and that makes it way worse. So the 2 key learnings that I've taken away from all this really expensive mistakes in organizational design are, 1, write down the kind of company and culture you want to create and bust it out all the time. So we have a sort of an internal rule at Storenvy that is, the culture is the company. So people talk about company culture like it's this thing over here, and then the company is over here. But we really believe that every single element of our company comes out of culture somehow. So our product is an expression of our culture. Our Twitter is an expression of our culture. Our support, the way we talk and support, is an expression of our culture. Our happy hours are obviously an expression of our culture, but it doesn't just end with happy hours and do you cater lunch or not? It's everything. And so write all this stuff down and get buy-in from every single team member as they join. And so what that does is it creates this document of sorts that is essentially the bad guy when someone's out of alignment with the culture. So it's not you, the stuffy CEO or manager or whatever, going, you're not a good fit around here. But instead you can go, well, here's sort of our guidelines for the way our culture is set up, and you're acting this other way, and it's not in alignment with that. So it's not that you're judging them, it's that the whole company has agreed to sort of adhere to this set of rules, and this person is, it's more of an objective analysis that way. And then the other learning is, if something's dysfunctional, it's probably you. So work on that. And we have a rule at Storenvy is that don't complain unless you're going to do something about it. So sometimes that could be just go to the engineer who can fix it. But it's really sucky to say our search doesn't work. Like, I hate it when our search doesn't work. Our search doesn't work, and you're listening to that all the time. Other team members complaining about it. Shut up or go do something about it. That's basically the rule that we have, because it just breeds negativity. And if you're not going to do something about it, no one is. If you're just a member of a team and you think something sucks, well, I could tell you that your boss probably knows it sucks and has no idea how to fix it, because I've been there. Like, for months, we had these dysfunctions, and I was really aware of it, and so was everyone else, and I just didn't know how to fix it. But if I'd have had 2 or 3 team members come to me and say, okay, this has been bad, but we really want to fix this together, I'd have been like, oh, thank God, like, help. Someone to help me, and we can do this together. So please, please, please feel empowered to take this on. And again, the number one skill in startups is the ability to learn really, really fast. I don't think about any of this as failures. Just someone said to me one time that VCs are in the business of student loans. So I wholeheartedly believe that. Learn as fast as you can, and hopefully this was helpful. Thank you. Should I hang on to this? Okay.
All right, so we're opening the floor to questions. You guys are used to this by now. Jon, after a couple attempts, has built a successful team of people. Hiccups along the way.
Hi, I'm Dale Larson. Is this on? And I'm an executive coach who works with founders, so I'm curious for you, because we say this all the time. A CEO comes to me and says, my organization needs to change in this or that way. I say, great. Yep. How are we going to change you? What support did you get that helped you come to these realizations and to help make the changes you needed in your company?
So I've actually, I've been a lone wolf most of my life, and definitely in my career. Single founder of the company. And so I came to the realization that I needed to fire my entire team by myself, which was a very, very, very lonely place to be, especially the investor phone calls, where you could kind of tell they were rolling their eyes. That being said, we did raise $5 million more after that happened, so from the same people. So I eventually got back in good graces with them, but they were shocked to hear it. But for the last year, I've worked with an executive coach. And so I've gotten, a lot of this thinking around the organizational dysfunction from that, and thinking about organizational design and the family dynamic stuff that I mentioned. And so, yeah, I highly recommend having an executive coach. Yeah, cool.
Hi. I really like the idea of kind of writing down what your cultural principles you want to build your organization around. My question is, it seems like that's really an organic thing that evolves as part of the team and together versus kind of a set of rules that you follow. So I'm wondering kind of how you did you enforce that culture, or was it something that you had a conversation around? And then also how you communicated that to new members, and what form you're writing it down came in such that it was really digestible for new teammates, and then also for everyone to kind of rally around.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, you're going to fail at your cultural principles that you try to write down, and that's okay. So, I'm an engineer, and one of the first things that we did with sort of the second batch was we wrote down all these engineering principles that we were going to adhere to. That's really the only stuff that we wrote down in that batch. We didn't really talk about the overall company culture, but it was like, we're going to use pull requests, and there's going to be this kind of commit message. And we wrote all this stuff down, and then we realized that we're not a engineering-driven company. We're a user-driven company, and we completely scrapped all that stuff. So it should be very organic, and every new person that comes in will impact it and add to it, and feel free to revisit and throw things away, reword them, but just not having anything written down is, you're floating around in outer space. Like, you don't have anything to anchor you. It should evolve, it should change, it should get better, you should take things out, put new things in, but you gotta start somewhere. It's like kind of more of a manifesto. Yeah, and honestly, you do want to help people feel bought into it. So a PowerPoint would probably be a bad idea, only because it's sort of like, the CEO or whoever handing down these rules that you have to behave around. But more like, hey, I've been working on this thing, guys, and I really, I want to be intentional about the kind of company culture that we create together. And so here's what I'm thinking. And I actually sat down one by one when we first did this with each person that was sort of a stakeholder, if you will, and got their input on it. And I got their, buy-in. And they added things. And what I actually did was every department, engineering, merchandising, design, I had them take the 11 sort of brand and culture principles and reword them into the area that was specific to their domain. So I even did it with the office manager. So one thing that we do is users, we want to make people feel empowered in our community. And so the office manager's job is to make the team feel empowered. And so we kind of cascade it down like that. But it was on a one-by-one basis.
Yes. So one of the team dysfunctions I've personally experienced is when you bring someone into a very early stage startup who's perhaps spent some time in mainstream business world and just trying to get them kind of calibrated their thinking. I had kind of a disastrous thing, and I was unable to solve that. And I'm just wondering if you've experienced that and how you were able to get this person basically on board and to be coming from the right mind space.
The truth is like this is one of those things where you just have to try it and maybe fail at it and maybe get lucky. I have a member of my team. I hired two people that have almost the exact same profile, worked for public companies, high up in the organization, and they both said they were really hungry to get back on the ground and build something. And one of them was an executor, and one of them was still sort of up here just wanting to think about ideas. And I had to run the experiment and see, so giving people a period of time, I think probably a good thing for a manager, especially in a startup, is to just in the back of your mind think, I'm going to give this person 90 days and then just reevaluate. And 90 days on somebody who you believe in but aren't sure about is not that much. And startups, they say hire slow, fire fast. Cut it off. As soon as you start worrying about it, then it's too late, basically. But yeah, I don't think that there's a strategy. I think you just have to try it, and if it doesn't work, move on. All right, cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, John. The water in your badge. You won't hear me actually talk much about my other full-time job because I try to keep them separate. But two things in John's talk really rang true for me. I work for a company called Pocket Gems. It's a mobile game company. Two things they did that John reminded me of is they hired me based on potential and work ethic. I had no experience in game design whatsoever. And they just had a bunch of meetings with me and were like, okay, you can get shit done. We can teach you how to get it done. So that rang very true of, I think, that a lot of success can be based on finding those people that you can teach. A second thing, and something that they did, is they have 170 employees, and they scheduled 5-person meetings with every single one of them to go over their culture document that they're working on right now. It is also a Google Doc, not a PowerPoint, so people can leave, any employee can leave comments anywhere on the Google Doc, and it's just 5-person roundtables that they spent 3 months just going over core principles. How does this feel? Would you want to stand behind this? And they also recognized that some of the culture points they put in there were not things they were doing, they were things they were attaining to. And they recognized that very publicly with all of the employees. Like, hey, we know we're not getting this one right yet. It's what we're striving to do. So those were some kind of cool takeaways that I took from Jon's talk.